I'll be planning our route. We're gonna take real soon. Circle down our world. Can't wait till June. We'll all be gone for the summer. We'll run so far away to stay. Tell the teacher we're serving USA. You get to serving in Selma, Ventura County line, Santa Cruz and Tristan, all three here is mine. All over Manhattan, and down the Heaney Way, everybody's gone serving USA. Everybody's gone serving USA. Everybody's gone. Come, come into my heart. Your little darling, we will never part. Our little darling, come and go with me. Yeah, I really need you.
Okay, guys,
Say you never leave.
come find your seats. Everyone, please come take your seats. We're about ready to begin. If you could take your seats.
Love potion number 9. She bent down and turned around and gave me a wink. She said, I'm gonna mix it up right here in the sink. It smelled like turpentine, it looked like Indian ink. I held my nose, I closed my eyes, I took a drink. I didn't know if it was day or night. I said, hey, let's go all over the world. Rock and roll girl, rock and roll girl. Hey, let's go all over the world. Rock and roll girl. One more time, go girl. Hey, my one and only girl.
Okay, let's get started. Never hurts to have a little bit of rock and roll. Thank you so much, Kathia and Alan, for joining us for this Member Spotlight. Welcome to all of you who are online joining us. Welcome to everyone here, and it's a real success when you see almost as many people here for the Member Spotlight as we had for church. So thank you all for being here. This is an amazing couple. I've had so much fun getting to know them. They were early settlers here in Naples. Really, pioneers, you know, compared to the rest of us. You know, maybe not all of us, but compared to most of us. Also, early on as church members of Naples Community Church, following Kurt. They also have been early, really forming education here in Naples. They've been major contributors to the fabric of our educational community, is how I look at it. So we really look to you guys as having brought an awful lot to this community. And I'm also going to borrow from the F3 Women's Group and give you an F3, and that is faith, family, and fun, along with a big M for music, which is so much a part of what you've done. And for those of you who might not know, Kathia and Alan were also the face with, at the time we came to church here in 2017, with along with Nanette and Mike Finkel, the Faces of Communion, who served us every month. So I remember that, and you've been real integral to our whole church family. Thank you so much for doing this and being such a great contributor to so much here in Naples. With that,
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you very much, Chris.
let me know if you can't hear me. I guess you can just kind of wave in the air or go like that, because I've not used a microphone before. He's the singer. I was actually the drummer, and I'll tell you how I became the drummer.
Well, beforehand, before you tell her that video you were watching was our band, in case you didn't recognize me out front, and in the back was the drummer, where we always try to put the drummer in the back. But and there were 4 of us, and this was when we did a little thing down on 3rd Avenue South. I don't know, this is probably about 10, 15 years ago. Okay, now, and the band was called Runaround. It's evolved with different names, but anyway, she's going to tell you a story about the drummer.
Well, I never wanted to be a drummer. What happened was we lived here about 10 years. His drummer, yeah, little flamboyance. His drummer died, and he put an ad in the paper, no answer. He asked around all his friends and acquaintances. We lived here 10 years, so we did have a few acquaintances and friends. And nobody knew of a drummer, and nobody could recommend one. I mean, this is a small town in the early 80s, and it just was no response. So, you know, what do you do as a wife? You see your husband suffering with no drummer. So a wife steps up. She says, "Oh, honey, I will take lessons." I was way too old to learn drumming. I mean, you're going to start kind of young, teenager, you know, at the latest. But I went to my teacher, my drum teacher, and I worked hard and finally rose to the level I would think of barely adequate drummer. And but they accepted me anyway in the band. And that's the story. But we should go back to the early 70s when we actually moved here.
Yes, thank you. We are going to start. This is just one other slide. That was a hobby. Our band has always been a hobby. We both had full-time jobs and a family to raise, but it was lots of fun. Just briefly, we're going to start kind of when we moved here, as Kathia said, and then we'll go back and talk a little bit about the years before that. But I remember flying down in 1971, I think it was, with Kathia. Her father lived in Sarasota, so we were we were both teachers up in Connecticut, Westport, Connecticut, had been teachers there, and we were getting on the plane at JFK, and I remember it was a February, heavy snow, wind blowing, we're huddled, waiting for the bus to pick us up from the car parking area. We get on the plane, somehow we get out, and fly down, we're coming into Sarasota, and the wing, we're going like this, and I'm looking out, there's palm trees, red and green lights, it's about 9:30 at night, the temperature's about 70. I'm thinking to myself, are we crazy? Why aren't we living down here where we can actually have some fun? So at that point we decided, both of us, that we're going to move to Florida. And sight unseen, she hadn't even seen Naples. I happened to get a job and ended up taking a job at Gulfview Middle School, although I had been a high school teacher of physics and other science up in Westport, Connecticut. And I took a job here at Gulfview because it was available. But anyway, that was how we came down here. And we found our first house over in Lake Park, and bought that for $30,500. I still have the original flyer for that. And we'd looked around at other places and thought, well, we could afford this, actually. And so we bought that, and that's how we started down here. Okay, now I'm going to have Kat tell you a little bit about how we found a church that we liked.
Yeah, we wanted to find a church right away. So we were in Lake Park neighborhood, and we figured there's a church right there. It's called the Church of God. And I figured, what better name for a church, the Church of God? So off we went to the Church of God. We could walk there from our house. So it's very convenient. With a baby and a toddler, you know, we were able to walk to that church. And when we entered the grounds, people started greeting us, brother, welcome, and sister, welcome. I'd never been called brother or sister, you know, by anybody before in that context. You know, I didn't even know them. So I was a little leery of the whole situation, and we, you know, sat down in church, and the service lasted over 2 hours. way past lunchtime, so we kind of felt that that wasn't the church for us. So we decided that, we had children, we couldn't just leave them in a nursery that long. We decided we'd try then a Lutheran church, because Al had been brought up Lutheran. But yeah, at that time with the baby and all, I didn't want to be genuflecting constantly, and that's what the Lutheran church makes you do, up and down and up and down.
Some Lutheran churches.
Knees were hurting. That was over in Mooring Line Drive. And then we went down to the Methodist church to try that one out a few weeks later, because I had been brought up Methodist. And during the sermon, the minister told a joke about a darky who had fallen into an open grave. And we weren't really used to darky jokes, so that, yeah, the Methodist church had to be scratched right off. My Lamaze teacher, who remained my friend after the birth, went to the Presbyterian church, First Pres. And so we said, well, we'll try one more church. I don't know what we'll do if this one bombs out. And we liked First Presbyterian Church, and that, of course, led us eventually a few decades later, to have Kurt as our pastor. So that's our story about church hunting.
Well, this was in about 1973, and that's when I started at Gulfview Middle School, and I taught there for 4.5 years science. I got a rude awakening because I had been teaching high school, and I didn't really understand middle school kids too well. Plus, there were 2 middle schools. There was Gulfview and there was East Naples Middle School, and that was it. So at that point, we were in a big crush in terms of students. So my classes were 35 to 40 students, all jittery and jumpy 7th and 8th graders. So I'm thinking, this is a whole new experience for me. And one story, I actually had some wonderful students, but I'm going to tell you some stories about the things that shocked me, because it was like, whoa, how is this happening? So this was my first year, and equipment was like nowhere to be found. The teachers had big turnover, and that's one of the problems. The equipment is thrown all over the place, so nothing was there. So I had rounded up a few magnifying glasses, just simple magnifying glasses. I decided I'll take my class outside. It's Florida, the sun is always shining, and we'll measure the focal length of that lens by putting a piece of cardboard, shining the sun through the lens, finding out where it's in focus, and measure that distance. Just a nice start to optics and a little bit about lenses and so on. So I had 13. I was able to round up, probably from the biology people, got 13 magnifying glasses. So we went out on Gulfview, out somewhere into the field, the football field probably, and these kids are burning each other on their arms and trying to get their shirts, their friend's shirt on fire. And so we come back in the classroom. So I said, okay, put the magnifying glasses up here. I passed out 13. I got 5 back. And I was so hurting for equipment, I couldn't abide by that. So I had to call the principal down. He had to search all the kids, and I think we got about 8 at the end, some of them throwing them out or whatever they did. But anyways, those kids, that one class, I remember one class, in our newspaper used to have a thing called Police Beat back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. And even if you got a DUI, your name was in the paper under Police Beat. So you were very careful. But anyway, a lot of these kids I had in 1973, 74 were on Police Beat in about 10 years' time, and for probably quite a bit more serious things. But that was just one particular class. I had some excellent students. I don't want to belabor this, but we were the only game in town. So there was no community school, no Seacrest, no St. John Newman, nothing. So we got everybody. We got all the kids, good kids, bad kids, and an awful lot of good kids, much outweighing the bad kids.
I'm glad to hear that. Meanwhile, I was trying to grow into the role of mother, and I remember the day I grew up. This was in 1974, and I was giving my little girl a bath in the tub, and yeah, she's here today. We'll get to them later. But yeah, I was giving her a bath in the tub, and down the tile of the tub, I saw a spider coming right toward her. And she turned and looked too, and both of us are like this, see the spider coming. And I knew at that moment that one of us had to kill that spider. She was 3 or 4, and I had a terrible fear of spiders. I've been bitten several times in my face as a child and swelled up. I had to just go to school like that. But I saw the spider coming, and sure enough, I knew I had to kill the spider. So I did. So I grew up in that regard. But there's one other way I kind of grew up that year. Again, a very small town, the sports section of the paper, which came only in the afternoon, by the way. It was an afternoon paper, the Naples Daily News was. The sports section had what? We had 2 high schools, and that's it. So they had articles about the Collier County Parks and Recreation Program, softball program, the men's softball teams and the women's softball teams. I had been playing already a couple years. It was now, I think, 1975, and I'd been playing for the First National Bank team, and I had amassed a batting average of .219. This is slow, high arc softball. .219 is the pits. I never had a good teacher for that. Anyway, I came to a new team in '75, sponsored by Trail Tire. Is Trail Tire still?
No.
I don't think so either. Probably my fault. Anyway, I came to play with them. And the night before, the first game of the season, the coach took us all aside, well, all of us infielders, to teach us how he wanted us to bat.
What position were you playing?
Well, I was one of the infielders. It doesn't matter what position, I was catcher. But the thing is, why did he take only the infielders aside to teach them how to bat? And why did he do it the night before the first game? Why didn't he do it like a month or 2 earlier? Because he was a jerk. Well, he was. Not every teacher you have is a wonderful person. But if they have something to teach you, that's the important thing. And I wanted to learn about teaching. I was teaching Lamaze at the time, and I had taught high school for a couple of years. So I knew teaching was going to be my destiny. And, he was a terrible guy, but he knew how to teach batting. And I listened to him. I needed that. I had a .219 average. None of the other girls listened. None of the other, we had a .460 hitter. She was a home run hitter. We had, the low 400s, 300s. These were good batters. These were good women. But they weren't students. I was the student. But he ignored me because I had a .219 average. Totally ignored me. Didn't realize that I was the one that's listening. And I went home that same night and did everything he had said. This is how to hold the racket. This is when to swing and when not to swing, and all, all kinds of advice. Take 8 swings at imaginary pitches. I took 8 swings in the dark at imaginary pitches that night. By near midway in the season, I had the highest batting average on the team. Thank you. Because I was a student. He had no other students on the team. Plus, he hadn't even shown the outfielders how to bat. He never did. They've been shagging. The guy was a jerk, I'm telling you right now. So, but he was a good teacher. That's the important thing. If your teacher is nasty, so what? If there's something that you need to learn, and that person has it. So I came to him when I realized, I read in the paper, since it was always in the paper how many hits I had, Miller got 3 hits, Miller got 2 hits, Miller had a double, that kind of stuff. So I knew I was, doing well. So I came to him and said, Ronnie, I said, I want to move up in the order. I told you women not to come to me and ask to move up in the order. Nasty temper. I told you not to ask to change positions in the outfield. He was really, I said, Ronnie, calmly, I said, just check with County Parks and Recreation, they'll tell you. So sure enough, next game I come, he calmly says to me, okay, I checked with County Parks, you were right, you're batting 3rd. I know, right in front of the home run hitter. And at the end of the season, I had not only the highest average on my team, I had the highest batting average in the entire league. I had a .588. I know. I went from .219 to a .588 because I was a student and he was a teacher. Jerk, yes, but a teacher. And that's my story about how I learned the relationship between teacher and student.
That's where our kids got their athletic ability, not from me. But anyway, back to me. I taught at Gulfview for 4.5 years, and then finally a position opened at Naples High School in the science department, physics, which I really had wanted to be at originally, but I asked the guy who came down and said, well, you're going to be moving. I said, well, do I have a choice here? No. So I was moved up to Naples High. We had wonderful students. It was just prior to Baron Collier opening. So we had kind of a mix of kids that were eventually, some were going to go to Barron. Laley had opened in '74. And anyway, I had excellent students. Falconer Jones, his son was one of my students in the early '80s, and just extremely good, smart kids. And teaching physics, I had the best of the best, so it was really a prime job, although I didn't have all physics classes. I usually had 2 or 3. I started an AP physics class in 1978 under the prompting of some students who wanted to have it. But I had to fill in usually with a couple of science classes, and usually physical science. And when they say physical science, you know that these kids are really not going to be biology, chemistry, physics students. They're going to be a little lower. So anyway, this group had one guy in it. He was a kid, but he was probably 6'2" or so. His name was Robert, and I'm trying to teach this class of kids who really aren't great in science. And he's messing around back there, so I warned him a couple of times to please, keep it down. And then finally he's getting too noisy. I says, Robert, I'm going to have to ask you to leave the room, please. So he gets up, and he says, it's about time I got out of this blanking place, grabs his desk, boom, throws it against the wall, which was about 15 or 20 feet away, kabam, against the wall, and he storms out of the classroom, and we never saw him again. He just left. But those are kind of the shocking things that stick in your mind that occur when you're in the classroom. You're unexpected. But anyways, I was in shock. Luckily, nobody got hurt. But that was my one story from early on there. Let me get this up here. These are our 3 children. At this point, we had 3. I'm going to tear up because that seems like yesterday, and it's, almost 50 years ago. But anyway, these are our 3 kids on the beach, and we've got our youngest on the left there, Lynn, and then Zach and Paula, and we're going to show a little bit more of them. But here's a photo that Kath's going to talk about briefly.
Well, yes, I will mention that. That is the trail, US 41, just a mile up. And you can see that there's ice all over the place because there was a freeze in I would say it was probably 1980, that picture. It might have been 79, but 80, I think. And we picked up our son he was working. I picked up our son from school, from Lake Park, to bring him out because the newspaper was going to take a picture. And that's our littlest, Lynn. She's sitting over there. And she wasn't in school yet, so I could take her over, and they just sort of sucked on that's right, these were all in the Naples Daily News. Right there on the trail. We had a couple freezes in Golden Gate, but right on 41 was almost unheard of. But we did have one then.
This is me and my 2 daughters. I kind of feel really good about having 2 beautiful girls next to me. That's Paul on the left, that's me, and Lynn on the right, and this was on a cruise we were on. And this is my son on the left and me on the right. We were going to the Phil, whatever it is called, Artis, for a Beatles tribute band, so we kind of had our British ties on. We're having a good time. And this is our daughter Paula and her husband Steve. Now, they are here today, as well as our youngest daughter Lynn, so let me introduce them briefly. Paula is here, she's our oldest, and her husband Steve. And we're fortunate to have Steve's parents here from California, Mary Lynn and Fred. They're visiting for a week, so they decided to come. Zach, our middle son, our son, who's in the middle between the 2 girls, is in Miami, so he was unable to come. And our youngest is back there, Lynn. She's married.
And she lives just up the trail where that picture was taken, the same street, actually.
This is our son, Zach, and his son, Warren. And this is Lynn down there with her 3 children and her husband, Chris Brown. And was one of our Christmas photos, I believe, that we used on a Christmas card. Yes. So they're in town. Paul is up in Bonita, and Zach is over in Miami. So they all went off somewhere, but they all came back. They realized that this is a good place to be.
Yeah, we're very lucky. Would you like me to say something
Yes.
about?
Okay.
We also did have 2 exchange students, one in the early 80s from Germany, and we still keep up with that family, visiting them, and they come back here to see us. And we had another one, because that was such a success. We had another one in the early 2000s. She was from China, and it was very...
Shanghai, actually.
Okay. It was, very hard, well, impossible to understand her when she talked to her parents, either on the phone or over the computer. And so we didn't know what she was about most of the time. And it turned out that she was planning to defect, and she did. And we can tell you more about that later if there's time, but we had an exchange student defected to our country.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'll be
It's got a very interesting story, but
I will say, though, too, that my mother moved down here in 1980. She retired from her professorship. She was an English professor at UConn. And she died here 30 years later in her 100th year at Moorings Park. That's in 2010. My sister came down here actually in I shouldn't say not down, she came from California also. But she came here because she was dying, and she came in 1991. And I got her a house just 2 doors down to rent for the remaining few months of her life. That was traumatic for me, of course, to have her. She never got to be middle-aged. I mean, she was in her 40s when she died. And, never got to experience, never mind old age. We should always be thankful if we have old age in this room, because the alternative is of missing out on those other years is pretty awful.
And that was your only sibling.
And my only sibling, that's right.
All right, we're going to kind of go back to some of the ancestral things. We're not going to spend a lot of time on it, but these are my grandparents on my mother's side. They're from Russia. We're not sure exactly in Russia. When he had to register for the draft many, many years later, he put down Galicia, which I have looked up, and it's kind of bounced around as positions at Germany and Russia and so on. But they're in the middle there. My grandfather actually has a cigar in his right hand. When they arrived here, they weren't married, but they were sent immediately to Pennsylvania to the coal mines. So this is actually all probably coal miners that are here. Of course, they couldn't speak English. In fact, my grandmother never, ever learned to speak English, although she was here probably for 50 years before she died. She didn't like America very much. And in fact, she went back to Russia. Somehow she got back. We're talking, these are peasants from Russia and coal miners, so they didn't have a lot of money, but there were so many ships going back and forth that since she didn't like it so much in America because they worked too hard, she went back to Russia. Apparently twice is what my mother had told me. So and then she finally came back, and they settled in Penance, which doesn't exist anymore, which is outside Pittsburgh somewhere, coal town. And they saved up enough money to be able to move up to the middle of New York State, a place called Herkimer, New York. There was a Russian community up there, and there must have been contacts somehow, so they moved up to Herkimer, New York, and had a farm. So my mother was the oldest of 8 children, and her father actually learned English, mother never did. Father read Pravda, she said, all the time, so they got the Russian newspaper up there. My mother went to a one-room schoolhouse. There was one kid who knew both English and Russian, so the teacher would teach in English, and he would translate into Russian, so the 15 or 18 farm kids there could learn how to speak English and learn something. So she graduated actually from high school, which was quite amazing. And there was a Russian church, Russian Orthodox church in Herkimer, small town, probably about 8,000. These are my grandparents on my father's side. My father was the oldest of 7 children. They're from Germany, Austria, somewhere in that area. Again, borders change so often. He bounced around a bit, Texas and other places, eventually ended up in Little Falls, New York, on a farm. And my father was born in Little Falls. My mother was born in Pennsylvania. And they raised 7 children living, and a couple died, same on my mother's side. Let's see. What's next here? Anyway, my mother and father didn't live that far away from each other, so this is their honeymoon. It's nice to see your parents young and happy, and once you're a young kid, they're always telling you how to behave and so on. If you forget that they were once young and in love. This is when I was born in I won't give you the exact date, it's up there, it's in 1945. This is actually the hospital bill my mother saved. And down at the bottom, you can see it's for $55 and I guess 50 cents or 53 cents or something. So that was for the whole hospital bill for a week. We're not talking like 2 or 3 days when they rush them out right now, but they was there for a whole week. But anyway, I was born in Little Falls, New York, a nice small town of about 8,000, a little bit more about that. But at the same time, somebody else was being born. Well, about the same time.
I'm enough younger that I can say that at least. But yeah, I was born in Walter Reed Hospital. My father was in the Army at the time I was born, and Army Corps of Engineers, actually. He was a lifelong engineer. And the day after I was born, General Eisenhower was marching through the hospital checking his wounded troops, and he marched right past my little nursery. So that was an auspicious moment for me, I'm quite sure. And they had to name me, of course, my parents did, and they came up with Kathia. Okay, I'll tell you how it...
And these are educated people, too.
Yes, that's right. Anyway, so what happened was my mother wanted to name me Cornelia after her mother. My father said, Cornelia is such a big name to saddle a little old baby with. Let's not do that. So she said, how about Kate? That was my grandmother's or her mother's nickname. Oh, Kate's a nickname, Dad said. So Mother said, okay, how about Catherine? Well, that's too long a name also, my dad said. She said, well, how about, Kathy? Well, that's a nickname. So on and on they went. And one of them said at some point, because my mother in exasperation said, well, how about Kathia? The name doesn't exist, right? And my father said, that sounds great. So, but the problem was that my last name was Slaughter. Now that's not with an A, with an O. Slaughter was my last name. Now I'm spelling both names my whole life. Kathia and then Sloughter, which everybody misspelled, with an A. No, it's an O. And finally together, I think you and I, right, Chris, looked up my ancestry, and the King of England had sent over Henry Slaughter to the Americas. Well, it was actually in 1691, so that's really early. That's the same century in which Shakespeare was operating at the early end of it. So I think that's pretty cool that I have an ancestor that... Is there a slide? Oh, it's okay. Well, in any case, we couldn't find a picture of Henry. I don't know why. But he lived only a year here as the official governor of New York, which wasn't a state, the New York Territory. And then he died, but somehow he left a progenitor. No, it's not progenitor, it's the next genitor. Anyway, he left somebody, a little boy, and that's my great-millionth whatever grandfather. So that's pretty interesting, except that the name has now died out, Slaughter with an O, coming from that source. There are no more. My father and his brother were the last Slaughters. So I guess, I don't know if that's too bad, but it's nice not to have somebody spelling that all the dang time. My other ancestors, very briefly, I know one of them fought in the Battle of Waterloo, and he died at Waterloo, but he was only 18, but he left a little infant daughter, so that's one of my illustrious ancestors, poor soul. And also, I have, in my past, Indigent Flat Boatman. That was the name that they had to put, or the title they had to put on the steerage when they came across the ocean. Indigent Flat Boatman, so that's another one of my ancestors. And they were Dutch, and they came over in the mid-1800s.
And settled in Michigan, right?
They had to settle in Michigan, right?
Back to me. This is me and my brother. We look fairly happy, so either church is over or we got dressed up and we missed it, but it was always a battle on Sunday morning to get us to go to church. You know, we'd fake sleeping or whatever else. It was not much fun, Sunday school and church, but we did go fairly regularly. My brother was 3 years older. He was my only sibling, and he was a great role model. Here we are in our band uniforms. I was in the cadet band, and he was in the senior band. He was, like I say, a good role model. He ended up being president of his junior class and went on to the Air Force Academy, the first class that was actually at Colorado Springs. Never been on an airplane, never been out of New York State in his life, but off to Colorado Springs back then, it was like, we had about a 15, 20-mile radius of our lives. We never went much further than that. Here I am on the far left with some of our, I think these are probably 7th, 8th grade picture with me. Actually, it was a new trumpet. I had to use my uncle's cornet for many years, and finally, my parents popped for a new trumpet, so we were going off to some sectional or some kind of competition. We had a great music program in our school, in our city, actually. We had cadet band, a senior band. We had the symphony orchestra. We had the Little Falls had a symphony orchestra which would draw from about 30 or 40 miles away. I played in that because they were always hurting for trumpet players. We had a military band, which were ex-military guys who'd been in bands. Unbelievable, some of the players. Leo Patrikas, I remember, the lead trumpet player, was absolutely marvelous. And I played with them, and I play in the summer at the band concerts. They were always needed some high school kids to fill in. So that was a great experience, and we had a jazz band as well. So music was really a big part of my life. I really enjoyed it a lot. I wasn't playing guitar at this point. Trumpet was my instrument, and I really enjoyed it a great deal. Okay, let's see what we're going to do next here.
Oh, that's my mother. That's my mother, and I'm the one on the, well, I'm the older one. That's my little sister.
Oh, yeah, and one of the things, while I was into music in my band and all that kind of thing, or not band, we were just part of the concert band and so on. There was another gal here who liked music a lot, and she was watching some stuff down in Ridgefield, which I didn't even see.
Ridgefield, Connecticut was my hometown, and I went through school from 1st grade through 12th grade in the same building, so it was really a tiny little town. But during that time, my father was still with us. He actually, and my mother got divorced when I was 11, that's when he left. But in any case, before that, he would always put on Tommy Dorsey on television because my dad was a real jazz fanatic. I mean, he played jazz piano and jazz clarinet. He had an 11-piece band through college at Cornell. So he was just big into jazz. And so it was, you know, every Sunday, I guess it was, right after Kate Smith, When the Moon Comes Over the Mountain, that one. And he would make sure that we all watched, Tommy Dorsey. And so we got that was the clarinet. That's my, sorry about that. Yeah, anyway, so, and I'm sitting there, I'm 10 or 11, and suddenly, Tommy Dorsey announces a new talent, first time on television. And I'm sitting there, going bored, silly. Suddenly, since my baby left, I'm found a new place to dwell. It's down at the end of Lonely Street at Heartbreak Hotel. And baby, I'll be so lonely, baby. I'll be so, and I sit up like this. I'm 10 or 11. I know what I thought. I said, something for me. Finally, something for me. Not the not that, but the I'm like, oh my God. And he was on again on Tommy Dorsey. Of course, after that, he went on to, what was it again? Oh, Ed Sullivan, yeah. But then, the second time, again, and he did, I think, not Heartbreak Hotel, the other one, Blue Suede Shoes the second time. But I'll tell you, that just started me on rock and roll. Right from there, I loved it always.
We, Kathia and I, we almost lived parallel lives in a lot of ways. I was up there, I remember Saturday was the only time we would get a pro basketball game. I loved sports. I wasn't that great at them, but I loved them a lot. So I remember sitting with, I got a little scorebook, and I would score off of the television a Saturday afternoon game, usually the Syracuse Nationals and the Minneapolis Lakers, who now have moved on to greener pastures. But somewhere about less than 300 miles away, there was another gal who was watching also.
I watch the Knicks every Saturday afternoon. So, because I was just outside of New York City, probably about 50 minutes.
Well, anyways, there's a picture for you.
Oh, my dad, yeah. My dad loved his boat, and he loved jazz, he loved boats, and he loved engineering, and pretty much those were his three loves. So there he is, in Sarasota, probably.
Yes, looks like Sarasota. Between my 8th and 9th grade years, the summer of my 8th year, graduate, my father died. He was a welder, and while we were putting this thing together with Chris, and thank you, Chris, for doing all this work for us, and Mary, I failed to thank her. I hope she's still here for all the goodies. And Dustin, thank you guys so much for all the work you've done. But anyway, my father was a welder, and he died at age 45. Chris's father was a welder, same area. She grew up upstate New York as well. Died at 52. He was a welder of the same problem, hardening of the arteries or arterial sclerosis. They both had the same thing. So certainly occupational related deaths. So, and I've read about this, and eventually they began putting fans in and aeration things and that kind of thing. This is me, very proud to be valedictorian. Another kind of coincidence, Chris was a valedictorian of her class as well. Anyway, that was a real honor. Not a big class, maybe 90 kids or so on, but still an honor, and I felt pretty good, prideful, you might say, as Kurt would put it. And in fact, here I am off to Union College, Schenectady, New York. Doug Van Ort grew up about 3 miles, I think, from the Union College campus. Big Dutch place, Schenectady, New York is where it is. 1,200 men, or young boys, or young men, I should say. So you can see I feel pretty proud being there, and ivy-clad place. It was a very good school. But I thought, heck, you know, I'm a pretty good student. So freshman year, I was working in the admissions office, and I was filing things. So one time when I was filing things in the class of our class, 1967, I happened to come across my folder. So, you know, it's very tempting when you have something secretive about you. So I pulled my folder out and started looking through it. And they used to predict the index, the grade point average of incoming freshmen. So they had for me 1.3 out of a 4.0 system. I mean, I sunk. I'm thinking, Jiminy Cricket, I thought it was pretty good. I had good SAT scores and so on. Well, the problem was we were a pretty small high school, and we didn't have any advanced placement classes. And Union had probably about a third of the kids coming from New York City, and a lot of AP classes, advanced stuff, or prep schools. So anyway, thankfully, it was a motivational thing. I worked hard and graduated in the top third of my college class, so that felt pretty good. Okay, oops, let me go back. I want to save that one. Okay.
I'd like to talk about, you know,
Yep.
before I went to Cornell, had a similar rude awakening. I was told that because I read so slowly, I will never last past the first semester at Cornell. I just read too slowly. And I did. I was a slow reader. But where were these adults to tell me? Where were the people in their 40s, all grown up? You know, 40-year-olds know everything, don't they? So I looked to them. You know, why was I such a slow reader? You know, because I was smart. I mean, they told me I just would never make it. And I had to wait an awful long time to realize that when I read, I slowed down to smell the coffee like they tell you to. I slowed down to, you know, to experience all the sensory details. You know, smell the roses, they would say. And I did that. And I worked hard at Cornell. I knew I couldn't go running off to the library. I had to stay in my dorm room. I couldn't waste that 15 minutes going and 15 coming back where the library was. I had to stay and I had to study. I'm reading botany, trying to find something lovely that you know, an expression that I can really relate to in botany, for the love of heaven. But I did well. I did well at Cornell. I made it through, and I took an interesting course my senior year. I was an English major, by the way, and that's important because I took a course senior year called The Philosophy of Religion. And it was a wonderful course. We were focusing the first half of the semester on the existence of God. So, I'm reading St. Augustine and St. Anselm and all the saints I could possibly read, and Paley and on and on. So, first half of the semester going well. Second half of the semester, I had to write a paper. Now, English majors are okay writing papers, but the topic I had to write about was not imagine, but there is a table that's called N, like the small letter N. There's a table called N that no one's ever seen. You're going to have to prove it exists. How do you prove? I had proved God from experience. I worked with my Methodist youth group at college. I was a leader in the youth thing. I know I have a proof, for me that God exists. But this silly table called N. Okay, I wrote a paper, I got it back, I got a D on it. Now, English majors really don't take well to getting Ds on essays. And I went to the professor and pointed that out to him. I said, look, I'm English major, how can I get a D on this paper, right? And so, well, you can go back and rewrite it if you want to. He talked to me about it, and I rewrote it. I probably got a C, maybe. I never understood. Maybe Kurt will someday, I've been waiting for him, to tell me how I could prove this stupid table exists, even though no one's ever seen it. Anyway, that's in the past. But it meant something to me when I was teaching early, a class in which I had handed back their first papers. And I saw one guy on the aisle row. He stands up and he takes his paper, starts stuffing it into his bag, and then starts packing his books up, starts stalking. I'm not putting up with this. I'm not taking it. He's complaining. I do guys like that well, don't I? I've known a lot. Okay, so he complains, and he gets up to the door, and he's going to leave. And I knew what grade he'd gotten. He'd gotten a D. So from my experience at college, I said, I don't blame you to the guy. His hand hovers over the knob. I said, if I got the grade you got, I would be really upset too, and I would wonder how I would stick around long enough to find out how I could change that grade. And he lifts his hand up and doesn't leave. He goes back to the desk and sits down. So I had scored. Yeah, he wasn't a student, but still I'd scored off that experience of my getting a D. So when we use our experiences to advantage, good things happen. I'll just tell one last little, if it's okay. I know it's running out of time, but you're going to love this story. It's very short. Oh, no, that's why you're going to love it. I had always told my students, if they had asked me and they were in trouble in the course, I would say, take charge of your own education. I can only present the material. I can only encourage you. I was a college teacher. The college can only provide the curriculum. You have to take charge of your own education, and that helped a lot of them. So I had a student toward the end of my teaching who just never quite made it to class on time and didn't know where he was, and he walked in. He was probably 18, and was with a bunch of guys outside the class, laughing it up. And he'd come in about 3 or 4 minutes late, and he'd walk in the room, and we were quiet, and he'd look around going, like, where am I? He didn't know really for a moment where he was. So after class, he came up to talk to me finally. He should have come probably a little sooner, but he came up to talk to me. He said, Professor Miller, he said, I don't know what I'm doing in this class. I don't know how to do well. So I tried the old routine on him. I said, look, you're going to have to take charge of your own education. I said, it doesn't matter whether you dislike this course. It doesn't matter whether I'm the worst teacher you ever had. He says, oh, no, Professor Miller. He says, you're not the worst teacher I ever had. I've had way worse teachers than you. So I kind of sailed off into retirement with that.
A backhanded compliment, is that what they call that?
Yeah.
Well, anyway, we're getting close to the end here, so I don't want to keep you too long. Our parallel universes are about ready to actually cross. I went to Johns Hopkins University, got my master's degree in teaching, and my wife went from Cornell to Brown University for the same actually degree. So somehow my Johns Hopkins had a thing going on with Westport, Connecticut, so I got a job there teaching physics and some other science classes. And the first year was kind of boring, not a lot of young girls to meet and that kind of thing, young women, I should say. No, let's not go there. And anyway, so I was about ready to leave and move on to some other place. And then the next year, this class of wonderful young ladies showed up, and with them was Kathia. And
And
here she is, the gal who stole my heart. It's on Westport, the beach, actually, close to the beach. This is winter, probably in January something. So we were married soon after that. Here's another shot of her. Always a fun-loving one.
yeah, he's got a camera out and he says, do something. I don't know what to do. But I will tell you, he talks about the lovely ladies who had come to teach in the same school, and he liked us all, so he invited all of us 4 new female teachers to play music with him. He had a singer, and he had some gal whacking on a kettle drum or a bass drum or some sort of whack, whack, whack. But we were very noisy with our tambourines and maracas and wood blocks. We non-musical teachers, and so he would put us in the coat closet. He said, you're too noisy, go stand in the coat closet.
Well, I wanted to record it. I was
Yeah.
recording on a reel-to-reel tape recorder.
So Mr. Hotshot puts the 3 or 4 of us poor ladies in the closet while he and the beating kettle drum and the singer were playing outside there. But that's okay.
Well, I wish I still had that tape of you guys in the closet there, but didn't come through. But anyway, so we met in over a plate of spaghetti in the teacher's lounge,
that's it.
and went on from there. I know it's 12, so we're almost done.
I know, I'm
We're real
just-
close. And
I didn't know that I'm aware
of
of
course,
it,
we
that's
fell in love. There's a gal who's
I know.
did it.
Very nice.
There we are, exiting Jesse Lee Memorial Methodist Church, Richfield, Connecticut. Most beautiful main street I'd ever seen in my life in Richfield, Connecticut. Old elms, pre-colonial type thing, absolutely unbelievable. So like I say, and then we picked up and moved on from Connecticut, but we had a wonderful, wonderful life we have. And I thank you so much for staying with us and listening to our story, and I hope you've
Very
enjoyed
patient,
yourself
very
somewhat.
patient, yeah.
Thank you. And if you have any questions, we certainly will
Got a question right here.
try to answer them in the short time we have. Hey, Joe.
Question. Oh, such enthusiasm. We really appreciate that. That was great. We need to listen to it about another couple hours to really absorb and process it. But here's the question. My dad was a musician, and my mother was the stay-at-home mom. You apparently were working as well as a teacher and teaching profession, both of you, right?
Yes.
So my question is, was your love for music a challenge to the love as a family? And how did that work out?
Excellent question. This was a hobby. This wasn't like Billy Dean and Dawn here. We're not out playing every weekend and doing that kind of thing. So it was a hobby. Luckily, our kids were all musical. All 3 of our kids played piano. Thank goodness my wife made them take piano lessons. 2 of them actually played with our band at times when we'd go out and play around. So they became part of the whole thing as well. But it wasn't, it wasn't a big thing, and it wasn't like we're always doing music. It's just our jobs were number 1, family was number 2, and this was a distant third for sure. But thank you, good question. Yes.
Hi. You lived in Westport, Connecticut, and so did we. What year did you teach there or live there?
Well, I got my job there in 1968 at Staples High School.
Staples.
And we lived in that area till 1973. Westport was a wonderful place. I'm sure, did you go to...
Yes, my children were brought up there and went to Staples High School.
I'll bet.
Yeah,
Yeah, good.
yeah.
Because I taught there too.
Oh, you
yeah.
did? And what year, may I ask? The same?
She was
Right
1 year
after-
behind
right
me.
after
1 year
him, and then
behind. Okay,
stayed for
yeah.
a few years.
My children graduated in 74 and 76. I'm sorry.
So just after us.
93 and 94.
Oh, okay.
So it was after.
Yeah.
That makes-
Okay,
that
well,
makes
yeah, we missed them by a
Thank you.
few decades.
And you know
but-
what else you missed? You missed Paul Newman, because his kids went there, and every time you met him, well, yeah, we did too. Yes. But when his back to school night, parents' night, it was on, he had probably 60 parents going to the same classroom he would go to because they wanted to pretend that they had kids in the same classrooms they could see Paul Newman.
And actually, he came and spoke to all the teachers about drugs back.
He did. He gave an anti-drug speech to all of us in the after-school hours. And I just remember that after the 7th time, he said, about the 7th time, the English teachers who were sitting there, we all started, get our pencils out. That's another time. See how many times, because he wasn't comfortable giving speeches. It wasn't what he wanted to do, but he was kind enough, to come and talk to us about drugs. But we got up to 29 times, he said, in the final analysis. But he still was a wonderful guy. Yeah, he was.
Don't we love these spotlights? We find out so much about each other. I found out they're musicians. I'm always recruiting,
Well,
You guys-
we're not in the same class
No,
as you, so
I think everybody'd love to hear you.
Yeah,
So that's awesome.
it's kind of a loose term from
Well,
us.
he can carry a tune, though. That's something.
Well, I can carry a tune.
Yep.
Wonderful job, you guys. Thank you so very much. I would say that if anyone has any particular questions, to come forward and just talk with everyone so others can get onto their Sunday afternoon. But thanks so much for staying with us. And for all of you online, hope you've enjoyed it as much as we have. We've had so many laughs with you.
Oh, good. Well, and if you want to find out real true stuff, of course, here's the one daughter and here's the other one. So you can pump them.
Proof of all of your good contribution.
Thank you for your patience. Thank you very much.